Hi, my name is Colin, and today I'm going to be talking about is stereo useful and practical for live applications. So basically, I have seen a number of people on Facebook groups and gear forums and pages kind of cautioning people, almost trying to persuade them against going stereo with their rigs for the idea that you don't want to have stereo for live uses in particular because your audience is going to hear something, your left audience is going to hear something different from your right audience and vice versa. And so you shouldn't do it. It's not practical. It's not worth it because you want everybody to have the same experience from what they're hearing, which I would agree with that last part. But this whole video is going to break that down, and we're going to look at some examples I've recorded all in stereo, and we're going to listen to them. We're going to solo the left and the right, and we're going to listen critically and hear, okay, is what's coming out of the left different than what's coming out of the right, part-wise? Obviously, if we had the exact same thing coming out of the left and the right, it wouldn't be stereo. That's what makes it stereo, is that you're hearing different information coming out the left and the right. But we're going to listen and see if the parts are different, because if it's something you can perceive, like a dual delay that's run in parallel, so you have two different subdivisions running independently in the left and the right, that would be an inappropriate use of stereo live, because your left will hear a dotted eighth, your right will hear an eighth or a quarter note or a half note or something, whatever. And that's actually my first example further in the video of an inappropriate use of stereo live, because yes, in that case your audience would hear different content, but that doesn't stereo does not equal hearing different parts left and right, especially for guitar or something like keys, where a lot of times it's just the stereo reverb that's the stereo part, or like I'll show in my examples, stereo often means just width. And yes, obviously your hard left and your hard right audience won't totally benefit from having stereo width. It's just mainly your center and your center left and your center right, and especially you as well in your ears if you're running stereo ears. And for churches, things like broadcasts, having a stereo mixture of your broadcasts will benefit massively from hearing things in stereo. And so that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to listen to some examples in mono, then we're going to open it up to stereo to hear the width differences, and then we're going to solo the left and the right channels to hear if we can perceive anything different coming out the left and the right, any different parts. If we can't identify an actual perceivable difference in the left and the right, then I would say it's a very appropriate and very practical use of stereo for live application. Because if you can't hear anything different in the soloed left and right, but when you have them both together, it sounds massive and wide, then I would say you're good to go, you're golden. And for anybody questioning this, because it's a video, a lot of people will be listening on headphones or phones or whatever, and they're not listening to something being played live. This is why this works, is because I'm not saying necessarily, oh, what you hear in headphones is going to translate out to live, because that's not exactly what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if we can solo the left, right, so we hear what's happening in the left channel only, which is the argument that only people on the left side of the crowd will hear what's coming out of the left channel, and then we solo the right, what would be what the people on the right side of the crowd would be hearing, and they have the exact same part going on. They sound, as far as we can tell, identical. And then when we open it up to hearing both, and it's wide and it's stereo and it sounds amazing, that's appropriate use of live or of stereo live. That's where the argument that people are hearing different things goes out the window, because if you have width and both channels have the exact same part coming out, you're good to go. So yeah, if I didn't say it already, I'm running my rig through, or I'm running my American-made Fender Strat Deluxe through my pedal board, which is I have a compressor on going into my Strymon Iridium, stereo out to my Strymon Mobius, stereo out to my Timeline, stereo out to my Big Sky. I'm a Strymon fan and I'm unashamed of it, mostly. Maybe I'm a little ashamed. Very mainstream, but they sound good. So anyways, that's what I'll be running through. Everything's in stereo. And yeah, so unless I've missed anything, here are the examples. Okay, so for this first example, I'm actually going to demonstrate what a bad use, an inappropriate use of a stereo signal chain for live use would be. So the first example that I have recorded here is a dual delay running in parallel. So we have one independent delay on the left, one independent delay on the right, running at two different subdivisions. The subdivision on the left is a dotted eighth. The subdivision on the right is an eighth note. So let's listen to it. First in mono, I have my left channel, my right channel, pan hard right, and then on the my stereo output, all I have is my manipulator on it. I don't have any stereo widening. I don't have any compression or EQing or anything like that. All I have is it set to sum to mono whenever I turn the plugin on. So let's listen first to the dual delay in parallel in mono. All right, now we're going to listen to it in stereo. Okay, so immediately, definitely wider for sure in stereo. Gives much more space to breathe. You have that very nice width of the two delays bouncing back and forth, different subdivisions. You can hear the reverb popping out a little bit more. It has more depth to it. What you would expect for stereo. So let's now solo the left channel, and the way I'm going to flip back and forth is I'm just going to mute the right channel, which is going to allow only the left channel to play. And then we want to flip to the right channel, and we're just going to solo the right channel, so I'm not clicking back and forth a bunch. So it'll be left channel, right channel. So let's listen to the left first. Okay, now right channel. Okay, so as you can hear there, left channel has very, very close to the same rhythm we heard in the beginning, just maybe a little bit less plucky because we don't have the right channel going, right? But then when you solo the right channel, it's a very noticeable difference, right? It's almost like you're playing, it's playing over itself because it's not that kind of syncopated. I don't even know if that's the right term. I probably just got that wrong. But it's not the dotted eighth, right? So together, it sounds great. That width is there. The left channel sounds great. You have that pluckiness to it. The right channel, it doesn't sound bad necessarily, but it's for stereo use, this would be a bad example because your hard right audience is only going to hear that pluckiness, that very nice dotted eighth. The right side of the crowd is only going to hear that right delay coming out, that eighth note delay, and so they're not hearing the same part, right? They're hearing two different parts, and this is the typical example of what people say when they say stereo is not practical for live applications, because you want your whole audience to hear the same thing, right? So this would be an inappropriate use of stereo for live. But here on this set of recordings, the dual series, it's the same dual delay with the exact same settings, with the exception that instead of the dual delay running in parallel, this is running in series. So it's one stereo delay in front of another stereo delay, and they're interacting with each other this time. It's not isolated to the left and to the right. So let's listen to this starting in mono. Here we go. And stereo. Mono. Stereo. All right, so definitely you still hear a very noticeable difference in width and depth between mono and stereo. So now let's listen to the left and the right soloed and see what we hear, see if they're different. All right, right channel now. Left channel. Oops. Right channel. Okay, so if you heard the same thing I'm hearing, it's the same part. It's the same information coming out the left and the right. And again, this is I played the exact same part as the dual parallel and as this dual series. And you hear from the left to the right, you hear the same part because they're running in series. They're interacting with each other. They're not isolated to your left and your right, but there's still width to the stereo. So let's listen again in mono, and I'll switch back and forth to stereo. I'm not going to announce it just so you can focus on the part. If you want to see when I flipped, just look down here. When I switch on and off my plugin, when it's grayed out, it's off, which means we're in stereo. When it switches on, it turns blue, and that means we're running in mono. So we're going to start in mono and go back to stereo. Okay, so again, that is a very appropriate use of stereo in a live setting because you have the same parts coming out both sides. Your right audience is not going to be excluded from what your left audience is hearing or vice versa, but there's still width in your ears if you're running stereo ears, which I would 100% recommend. It's going to sound amazing to you. Your center and center left and center right audiences, they're going to hear the width and the part, and it's going to sound amazing out in the house. So this would be a very appropriate use of stereo for live applications. All right, so let's move on to this dotted eighth. So just a single delay head, dotted eighth. It's not ping pong or anything. It's very much like the dual running in series, except it's only one delay going on. So let's listen to that in mono real quick, and then we'll flip back and forth to stereo. I'm going to probably not specify when I'm going back and forth. If you want to see, just look down here, see if the plugin is on or if the plugin is off, so that you can really hear the part. So first in mono. Okay, so again, very noticeable difference in width and depth. You can hear the reverb more when it's in stereo, and it's very much wider, even though it's just one delay going on. So again, we'll solo the left and the right, and let's take a listen to see if we're hearing the same parts on each side. So yeah, that's the same part to my ears. And so again, a very appropriate use of stereo for live applications because both channels have the same part coming out. It will sound the same on each side, except there is stereo width to it. And some pedals don't have, some stereo pedals, to my knowledge, don't have stereo width on single delay heads, only if you use like a ping pong or a dual delay or something like that, or if you slap a ton of modulation on it and then it starts to sound kind of weird. As I said at the beginning of the video, I'm running through a Strymon timeline, and it does have the ability to, if you take your modulation depth and you turn it all the way up, it gives you a very nice stereo spread. If you turn it all the way down, then it actually kind of collapses back to mono. Sometimes I can hear, or I think I hear a little bit of depth, but it's really cool. You can turn the depth all the way up, gives you a very nice stereo image. Turn your speed all the way down, and it ends up giving you a very wide delay no matter what you're running on, what setting you're running on, but without a lot of modulation if you don't want a lot of modulation. And maybe you want even less modulation, but you still want that stereo spread. Well, then you can dial back the depth and have even less noticeable modulation than what is already not really there, but still have some stereo spread. So just a tip for any Strymon users for getting some stereo width out of it. Now I'm going to demonstrate what it sounds like with some actual modulation on. I'm going to be running a chorus now before my delay and reverb. Same reverb settings, same delay settings, except slower tempo. It's still the dotted eighth. And the first half of the recording up to here, I'm running a light digital chorus. And then towards the latter half, from here on, I switch to a multi-chorus for bigger, lusher chorus. And so let's listen to that. I'm going to start in mono, and let's take a listen. All right, now let's listen and see if we're hearing different stuff coming on the left and the right. Okay, again, here we have a nice stereo wide image, and yet we have the same parts coming in on the left and the right channel. And so again, a very appropriate use of stereo and of live application. All right, so this one we have a dry delay. So I turned off my reverb, turned off my modulation, and it's just my dotted eighth that I've been playing at a lower speed for chords, kind of like similar to what we did on this one, but not the same. So let's start with it in mono and see how it sounds. Oh, first thing I do is I'll play this clip. I don't know why I did this. I just recorded my dry signal just to hear that I don't have any reverb on it. So let's hear that. All right. And now mono in this one. All right, stereo. Okay, so you can probably hear a little bit of that modulation, and that's because I have a little bit on there. And so let's listen to the left and the right now. Okay, again, same content coming out the left and the right, except we have a very nice stereo spread. So once more, a very appropriate use of stereo in a live application. Okay, so this one is just reverb. No delay or anything. I just wanted to show a big, wide, super washy reverb. And so we'll start in mono. Okay, and we'll solo the left. Now the right. All right, so finally, another perfectly appropriate application of stereo for live usage. So again, the whole point of this is to show that stereo is incredibly useful for live applications because stereo doesn't always mean you have different parts coming out the left and the right. That's a misconception that I've seen a lot of people talking about. I've seen other people dissuade people from going stereo with their rig because they play live, they play in gigs, or they play at their churches or whatever. And their argument is very consistently, you don't want to use stereo for live usage because people on one side of the auditorium aren't going to hear the same thing as the people on the right, and you want it to be consistent for your whole crowd when you're playing live, which I would agree. Which again is why we would not use this dual parallel delay while running in a live application, but all these other examples are perfectly fine and add a ton if you're running stereo ears, if you're running stereo in the house, Your center crowd, center left, center right crowd are 100% going to benefit from that stereo width. If you were sitting in the auditorium playing and you could hear somebody, kind of like I did, summing to mono and then going back to stereo and summing to mono, you would notice a difference. Even take this video, hook it up to your computer or your TV, or if you work at a church or a venue, plug it up to the PA and play it in your PA and go stand in the middle of the room. And when you hear me soloing or summing to mono and then going back to stereo, you'll hear a difference. Will it be the biggest difference in the world? Maybe not. Is it worth it? I would say yes, if you have the ability to do so, to create a stereo pedal board and you'll run stereo live and run stereo ears. That's a huge part of it too. I would say absolutely do it. And again, as you can hear here, stereo does not equal different parts coming out the left and the right. You can have width that everybody can enjoy, everybody can hear. You can have width without sacrificing your left audience from your right audience, or vice versa. So yeah, I hope this was helpful and not too long and drawn out. I loved going stereo in my first stereo rig, and I will absolutely never go back. Once you go stereo, you can't go back. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, if it helped you make up your mind about running stereo or helped answer some questions regarding running stereo for live usage or maybe at all, please consider giving a like and a subscribe. So thank you. See you next video.